Hola y bienvenidos a este video donde vamos a mirar el presente. Hello and welcome to this video lesson where we're going to look at the Spanish present tense. Los retos de esta clase son to understand what the present tense is and when to use it, to be able to conjugate regular AR verbs in the present tense. So to conjugate means to sort of to form the verbs so that they tell us who's doing the action and when they're doing it. And lastly, to be aware of other verb endings and irregular verbs. Primero vamos a mirar ¿qué es el presente? So first of all, we're going to look at this question. ¿Qué es el presente? What is the present tense? The present tense is the tense that we use in Spanish to talk about what we normally do and what we're currently doing or what we do currently. So let's start off with an example in English. The verb to go, that's the infinitive, so no one's doing it, it's just the neutral verb. The verb to go in the present tense in English is conjugated like this. I go, you go, she goes, we go, you plural go, so you all go, and they go. So that's what I mean by conjugation. So we're going to be looking at the Spanish equivalent for this sort of thing. ¿Y cuándo se usa? When is it used? We use the present tense when we want to talk about what we normally do, what we're doing now, whether that means what we're doing right now or what we're doing over a period of time that includes now. For example, I could say, Aprendo español. I learn Spanish. So it doesn't necessarily mean I'm learning it right now as we speak, but it means that I'm learning Spanish over a period of time that includes this moment. Normalmente como chocolate. Normally I eat chocolate. So when we use normalmente and we talk about things we habitually do, we're using the present tense. Por la noche veo la tele. In the evening, I watch TV. So again, it's a habitual thing that we tend to do in the evenings. So all of these, aprendo, I learn, como, I eat, veo, I watch, they're all examples of the present tense. ¿Y cómo se conjuga? How is it conjugated? So remember, to conjugate a verb just means to take the verb and make it so that someone's doing it and it's clear what tense it's in when the person's doing it. So first of all, we need our infinitive. In English, the infinitives are words like to go, to dance, to sleep, so they always have to in front of it. In Spanish, it's all one word, so our example today is bailar, bailar, which is the verb to dance. So that idea that it's to dance, it's all built into the verb, and this verb has an AR ending. There are also ER and IR endings, but today we're just going to be focusing on the AR ones, which are the most common. So once we've got our infinitive, to dance, bailar, we now need to chop off that AR ending. So we take our infinitive verb, bailar, and we get rid of the AR. This leaves us with what we call the verb stem. And then we just tag on to the end of this one of our present tense endings, which we're going to be looking at in just a moment. So what are our verb endings? So remember, we take the infinitive bailar, to dance, get rid of the ending, the AR ending, we're left with our stem, and then we need to add one of the following present tense endings. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. Now these endings tell us who's doing the dancing, who's doing the verb, and when they're doing it. So these are for the present tense. And they correspond to different people. And we tend to learn these in a certain pattern, which is I, you, he, she, it, we, you plural, they. So that first you is you singular, so when you're addressing just one person, and when you're addressing a group of people, like you all or you lot, then it's you plural. So I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. So that means that when we read these words out with the verb stem and the ending, bailo means I dance, bailas means you dance, baila means he, she, or it dances, bailamos means we dance, bailais means you lot or you all dance, and bailan means they dance. So in Spanish it's actually easier in some ways just with one word. we're finding out what the action is, who's doing it, and when they're doing it. You'll often see verbs and verb endings presented in what we call a conjugation table. So sometimes you'll see them in a sort of one column with 6 endings, or sometimes you'll see them like this with all of the singular ones on the left and all of the plural ones on the right. So we have I, you singular, he, she, and it on the left, as well as the formal you, which is something you'll look at in the future once you've sort of learned some of the basics. We, you plural, they on the right. So all the single people on the left and all of the plural people on the right. And then our endings for our present tense AR verbs are o, as, a, amos, ais, an. So these are the verb endings we need to learn in order to use the most common type of verb that we have in Spanish to communicate ideas in the present tense. Now you might be wondering, how on earth am I going to learn all of these endings? They might look a bit strange to you. In English, the conjugations can be a bit easier, like we saw with dance. It's only really dance or dances. With go, it's only really go or goes, whereas in Spanish you've got 6 different ways to say it. But they're actually not that bad. It might help you to learn the sounds of these endings with some of these emojis. So here we've got the O sound, which is the I one. O. Bailo. O. Then we've got the U form, which sounds like a rude word in English, as. And it also sounds like another name for a donkey, as. Then for the he, she, and it ending, we have a. Like you're at the dentist and they ask you to say a. O, as, a. Then we've got the we form, which starts off very much like the he, she, it form, a, but then we've also got moss. So this is a picture of some moss here to help jog your memory. Amos. Amos. Now the next one is for you plural, and it doesn't really sound the way it looks. So it's written A-I-S, but it's pronounced ice. Ice. Just like an ice cube in English. Then our final one, for the they form, is an. I couldn't really think of a good picture to represent this, but it did make me think we've actually got this word in English. We don't say a apple, we say an apple. So hopefully that will help you to remember this. An. So the last 3, amos, ais, an. Now we're going to practice this. So here you've got the memory aids below, you've got the pictures of the different sounds. And what I'd like you to do in a moment is to pause the video and see if you can remember the 6 endings. Don't worry too much about spelling. If you can spell them all correctly, perfect, but think more about the sounds. So when you're ready, just pause the video, give that a practice, and then hit play. Okay, so let's go through them. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. So now I'd like us to practice that a little bit more. So we're going to look at how we'd use that with the verb bailar. So here we've got our infinitive again. We know we need to get rid of the ending, and then we're going to add each of the present tense endings onto our verb stem, so onto bail. So let's do the first one together. I dance, bailo. Now pause the video and see if you can remember, see if you can work out how we're going to conjugate this verb. So what it's going to look like for you dance, she dances, we dance, and so on. And when you're ready, just hit play again. Okay, let's go through them. So we've got number 1, I dance, bailo. You dance, bailas. She dances, baila. We dance, bailamos. You plural dance, bailais. So remember it sounds like ice. And they dance, bailan. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. If you've learnt those, that now means that you can conjugate hundreds of regular AR verbs. Here are just some examples. So the same as with bailar, all you have to do is take off the AR off of the infinitive at each of these verbs and add any of those 6 endings, and you're communicating in the present tense in Spanish. Now let's practice this with some different verbs. So let's look at our example again. Bailar, to dance. We know that if we want to say I dance, if we take off that AR, we put our O ending and we get bailo. So we're going to practice some different verbs, but only using the I ending. So we're only going to try and change it from the infinitive, the to something, and put it into the I form in the present tense. So I do the verb. So for example, to buy is comprar, comprar. How would we say I buy? Give it a few seconds of thought. What do we need to do? So we take off the AR and then we add our O ending. Compro. So compro, I buy. To speak is hablar, hablar. Notice that we don't pronounce the H. So the H in Spanish, you never pronounce it. It's just silent. Hablar. So if we want to say I speak, what's it going to be? We take off our AR, add an O, hablo. So you could say, hablo español. I speak Spanish. To study, estudiar, estudiar. You can see it's not that different from the English, really. You can see S-T-U-D in there. So if you want to say I study, it's going to be estudio. So you could also say estudio español. Estudio español. I study Spanish. Our next verb is to use, usar, so another similar one. So I use will be uso. Uso. To walk is caminar. So I walk is camino. Camino. Okay, now we're going to practice a little bit more, only with one verb, which is going to be the verb to speak, which is hablar. But this time we are going to put all of the different endings on there so that we can say I speak, you speak, he or she speaks, we speak, you plural speak, and they speak. So if you need the support, the memory aids of the emojis, here they are. And when you're ready, just pause the video and try and go through this and think about what each of these will be. So remember, we've got the infinitive hablar, we need to remove the AR ending, and then add our present tense endings. Okay, so when you're ready, give that a go, and then just push play to resume. Okay, let's go through them. So I speak, hablo, you speak, hablas. So you could say, ¿hablas español? Do you speak Spanish? He or she speaks, habla. Mi amigo habla español. My friend speaks Spanish. We speak, hablamos. Hablamos español. We speak Spanish. You plural speak, habláis. And they speak, hablan. Hablan. Now I did mention that there are some other verbs. So in Spanish there are verbs that end in ea, like the ones we've looked at, bailar, hablar, comprar. But there are also verbs that end in er and ir. So we've looked at bailar. There's also comer, which is an er verb, meaning to eat, and vivir, which is an ir verb, meaning to live. But there are no other types of verbs, so it's quite nice because in English the infinitives all look very different. There aren't really such nice patterns to follow, whereas in Spanish you're only ever going to encounter verbs that end in er, or ir. And the present tense endings for each of these different types of verbs is slightly different, but they're only a little bit different and they're not hard to learn. In fact, for the I form, it's the same ending for all of them. So if we want to say I dance, we know that it's bailo. So if I tell you that the er ending is the same in the I form, what would comer be? It's going to be como. So como, I eat. Como chocolate, I eat chocolate. And the same with the IR verb. So vivir, to live. Vivo, I live. Vivo en Inglaterra. I live in England. There are also some irregular verbs that change in slightly different ways. So, for example, jugar is a AR verb meaning to play, but when we conjugate this into the present tense, it doesn't just change the AR for an O, it goes to juego. So you'll notice it's got this E that just magically appears in there. So there are some verbs that behave slightly differently. You'll learn these verbs in time, and I wouldn't worry about trying to learn them just yet. If this is the first time you've looked at AR verb endings, I'd say just try and focus on learning the present tense, verb endings that we've seen today, the o, as, a, amos, ais, and practice using them with different regular AR verbs. There are literally hundreds of them. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. Muchísimas gracias por ver. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been useful. Some next steps you might want to take, like I've said, to practice conjugating regular AR verbs in the present tense. Learning another language, it really is just practice, practice, practice. It's about memorizing those endings, using them with different regular AR verbs, and then the more you do it, the more quickly they'll pop into your mind and you'll be able to just say them without really thinking. When you feel that you've, sussed it out, you've got the AR verbs sorted, you might want to watch my video on free time and sports to learn a bit of vocabulary about different sports you can do. And really soon I'm going to be uploading videos for ER and IR verb endings as well, so watch out for those. Otra vez, muchas gracias y espero que te vaya muy bien con el español.